Hey guys, Noel here, and it's Thursday night. We got Impact Wrestling going on in the other room, and I thought it would be fun to do a take two of a video I uploaded today, and I looked at it, and I was like, I think I'll do a better version of it, and that's going to be something kind of fun. Hopefully you enjoy it. It's just going to be kind of my take on some interesting similarities that I've noticed between Donald Trump and the Atari VCS. Now, I do not believe that corporations are people, but nevertheless, there are some interesting similarities as far as how the Atari VCS team is behaving, and Donald Trump, how he behaves, and also kind of their rise to prominence and their appeal. I think there's some interesting similarities that are worth talking about. In fact, while I was thinking about this, I sketched this picture of Donald Trump wearing an Atari shirt. So please enjoy this, for your viewing pleasure. Anyway, it's Sharpie fun. Anyway, so I guess let's get down to it. You got to start somewhere, right? So let's start out with the fact that both Atari and Donald Trump have very passionate supporters and passionate detractors. That's one big similarity that both Atari and Trump have. And I think that the reason that people are so passionate is because on a positive side, I think both Donald Trump and Atari serve a purpose. People are dissatisfied with the status quo, and they are looking to the past, in this case, 1980s brand names, one being Atari and one being Donald Trump, to alleviate their malaise and alienation. Their critics get all fired up because there is, in my opinion, a lot to be desired with the substance of both Atari and Donald Trump. So as far as their appeal goes, people look to the 1980s and think to themselves, yeah, this was a time when America was standing tall, things were fun, lots of fun mass culture, MTV, Big Macs and the American flag, and all that kind of stuff. And now I think people don't feel that way about the United States. Like, take a look at MTV now, and then take a look at MTV in the 80s, and you can see culturally how much we've fallen. I mean, and I'm just talking about MTV, which has never been considered high culture. So even our mass culture is gone to becoming increasingly shallow. I think it's worth noting that I think a lot of the values in the 1980s did kind of evolve into what we have now, that took kind of a dark turn, basically because of an overemphasis on profit and an overemphasis on materialism and not having any kind of philosophical values to ground those. And I think that morphed into what we have now. But I think as far as Atari goes, in terms of the video game side of things, people remember a time when you had a certain experience playing video games. You bought a cartridge, you plugged your cartridge into your console, and that was it. That was the experience, and that cartridge was with you forever. It was a complete product, and that whole experience, it had a lot of wonder and excitement. Part of that comes with being a kid, but then also part of that, I think, comes with the fact that owning a video cartridge, something like Donkey Kong, that's actually a complete product. The gaming environment nowadays, with games like Fortnite, and I'm not hating on Fortnite, I'm just saying, like, it's never a complete experience. It's a constant economic drain on the consumer, and it's just not the. So it's like you're constantly buying new packs, new content, new skins, new weapons. A big example that from my experience I'd hearken to is Street Fighter. Street Fighter 5. When I bought it, it was absolutely an incomplete game. And I, who was used to playing games like Street Fighter Alpha 3, was used to a certain kind of quality. And when I popped in Street Fighter 5, I mean, it was nice for what it was, but it was not a complete game. And Capcom's answer to that was, well, we have seasonal passes that'll make it more like a complete game. Well, so this whole idea of Atari making games great again, which is implied in their pitch video. This idea is that we're going to take you back to a better time in video games, and Donald Trump's Make America Great Again, that's one reason why he's got passionate supporters, because people look back at the 1980s again as a time when they weren't so alienated and I don't know. I think that's that it might be imaginary. Wages started to stagnate in the 1980s, but I think there was definitely psychologically a different perception of how things worked in the 1980s. And people who support Donald Trump, they have legitimate reasons for being upset. I think people feel like the same way that the video game industry is exploiting people and trying to milk every cent out of them with seasonal passes and incomplete products and making you pay multiple times for the same game. People in the real world face real problems, like I can't find a job. Values that are sacred to me are being laughed at constantly. I feel like no one is listening to the most important material and personal concerns that I have, and the political and economical leader completely unaccountable for their actions. And when someone like Donald Trump comes along and offers empty slogans like "Make America Great Again" and starts kind of poking fun at bullying the bully, people get passionate and they support him. But then on the flip side of that, people get really passionate about detracting and kind of dissing Trump and Atari, because quite frankly, I don't think in either case there's really much substance to them. It's like, yeah, they're solutions to problems, but are they good solutions? I mean, in the case of Atari, they're claiming that they have a prototype for an exciting new game console, and there's absolutely no evidence of that. From what I can tell, the current form of Atari knows how to market the Atari name, but they don't know how to actually produce any hardware or software. Much the same way that "Make America Great Again" might be a nice slogan, but is there any actual substance or meaning to it, or is that just so broad that it's meaningless? And I would to throw criticism at the Democrats too. You could argue that Obama's "Change You Can Believe In" was also a meaningless slogan. Sounded nice, but was there any substance to it? No. So I think you could also argue another parallel with Trump and Atari is lack of substance. Another parallel that I think is interesting is the fact that talking about licensing, both Trump and Atari have licensed their names out a bunch of times. I was talking about this with someone on Atari Age the other day. But Donald Trump had Trump Steaks, Trump University. It's like he can just throw his name out, license it, and reap a profit from it. And again, Atari, if my suspicions are correct, and they're not actually people who know how to produce hardware and software running Atari right now, they know how to license the name and they know how to hype the name, but they don't know how to actually produce a product. So Stop, Drop, and Retro did a really good YouTube video about Atari in its current iteration, and I'm going to talk about another similarity is that Trump and Atari declared bankruptcy a bunch of times, but Atari has declared bankruptcy a bunch of times like Donald Trump. And because Donald Trump is a real person, there is continuity with Donald Trump's existence, right? With Atari, there's not continuity because Atari is a corporation, and corporations, despite what the Supreme Court might say, are not people. So through a series of bankruptcies, Atari now has completely different people in the company. The company is a completely different composition from what I can tell. And none of the people associated with the 70s, 80s, 90s Atari are actually there. And the suspicion that a lot of people are having based on looking at Atari's employees' LinkedIn pages is that all of these Atari employees have backgrounds in marketing, but it's hard to find someone with an actual background in electronics and hardware, especially in top levels of the company. So Atari, they license their name out to things like Chinese tablets or slot machines, but they've shown no real ability to make hardware in-house. So I think what they tried to do is they came up with a concept and they figured, well, we'll just find someone to make it for us. Well, it's harder than it sounds, right? In the case of Trump, again, easy to license your name out and make a product and make a profit and a product. And again, with Atari, quality is dubious, and again with Trump, his quality is dubious. People were suing him over Trump University, and both again, Trump and Atari, bankruptcy is again a strong parallel with Trump and Atari. So let me talk a little bit about Trump and Atari's relationship to their critics, and then we'll wrap this video up because it's like a million degrees outside. It's like I think I left my grill on the Chernobyl. The Aqua Teen Hunger Force reference. Anyway, burning a hole in the ozone out there. It's 242 degrees. Anyway, so both Trump and Atari have this tendency to use social media to attack their critics, and they are doing it structurally in a similar tone. For example, Atari recently came under fire for going after YouTuber RGT85 by calling him fake news. Well, I wonder where they got that label from, because Donald Trump is constantly calling his critics fake news. Now, I do want to draw an interesting distinction between the critics of Trump and the critics of Atari. I think the critics of Atari are actually more credible because they, from what I can tell, belong to a different class. They have a different background than the people, and they live in a different world than the people who are running Atari. From what I can tell, a lot of Atari's critics on YouTube and on podcasts, and even in the tech media like the Register, these are people who are consumers and fans of electronics. They're not actually producers of electronics, and they certainly don't seem to be involved in crowdfunding, either schemes or scams, however you want to look at it. They're people who are on the outside looking in and pointing out things that they are seeing as inconsistent and that they don't like. In the case of Trump's critics, I would argue that the mass media, especially the corporate media in the United States, you could argue that they're like the fourth branch of government. You have the legislative, the judicial, and the executive, and then you have kind of the information. And I mean, as far as I'm concerned, and you can read Noam Chomsky if you want, someone a lot more intelligent than me to tell you that, or Antonio Gramsci if you want to go older, the media serves a hegemonic purpose, basically. They reflect the interests of the ruling class in the way that they report stories and omit facts and frame things. So I would argue that the media is part of the same class as Donald Trump. It's infighting within the class. And because of that class affiliation, you could argue that the media is in some sense culpable for some of the problems that they blame Donald Trump for. Because if they're cheerleading a policy of a Democratic administration and it's causing a problem that Donald Trump is inheriting, that's different than RGT85 pointing out the fact that Atari does not have an actual functioning prototype. There's no evidence that they have a functioning prototype. And the quote-unquote game that was shown on this quote-unquote prototype, the developer for Tempest 4000, this is the thing I'm going to reference here, said that he did not make the game for Atari VCS. So things aren't adding up. RGT85 is pointing that out. And then Atari's getting defensive and saying, no, you're fake news. We're like the psychic friends. Everything is for entertainment purposes only. It's like Atari, when they got called out on that by RGT85, they were like, it's illustration purposes only. Read the fine print. So if I go and watch Miss Cleo, she can get away with saying anything because it says for entertainment purposes only. But with Trump and the mass media, I don't ever see there being a good amount of historical or political context for the criticism that Donald Trump gets. Because if you start applying historical and political context to things, you're going to start to see that the media may have been cheerleading certain policies that are very similar to things that Donald Trump is doing, or are in some sense responsible for what Donald Trump is inheriting. And that's not me making an apology for Donald Trump. That's just me saying that things are a lot more complicated, and the mass media that criticizes Trump is in some sense culpable for what they're complaining about. So that's pretty much all I have to say, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, this is just kind of me sharing my thoughts about a topic that I find interesting. And now I'm going to go get a big glass of water and watch professional wrestling. And until next time, guys, my name is Noel. You take care of yourself. I'll see you all sooner than later. Bye-bye.